Okay. Yeah.
Is it going?
Yeah.
Okay. Describe who you are, what you do, what's your profession.
My name is Sergio Robledo-Maderazo. I am a high school teacher over at Westmore High School in Daly City, and I'm a musician as well. Play music in a band.
How are you involved in the Asian American community?
Well, so I kind of do a couple different things in the community. One, as a teacher, it's a job, but it's definitely a community-based job, and I don't think it's something that people really think too much about. But as a teacher, you're interacting with, students on the day-to-day. You're interacting with their parents. You're interacting with your peers, who many of them whom are sort of living in the neighborhoods, and yeah. So as a teacher, I'm very much involved in the Asian American community. But in terms of more sort of focused community work, I am currently organizing with the Luana Cultural Center in Daly City, and I'm a board member, and I also work with one of the programs at Latin School for Equity, and so there's that, and then yeah, that's really it right now. And I think, and then there's the art stuff, the music stuff that isn't, necessarily, we've done shows that were like Asian American specific, like Pinoy's Pop and stuff, and folks sort of, have sort of embraced the band as sort of an Asian American band in the Asian American music scene and stuff like
that. Okay. What motivated or inspired you to be involved in the Asian American community?
I was kind of born into it. Yeah, I'm Filipino and live in America, and so there's that. But I think also in terms of deciding to be sort of actively involved in organizing or art stuff, music stuff, I don't know if I necessarily sought, like I actively was searching to be like, I'm going to be involved in the Asian American community, but more so just seemed to make sense. Get in where you fit in, like, in terms of, not fit in kind of a, hey guys, I fit in with you kind of way, but more like, where are you most effective in terms of making change and sort of being an active member of your community. And my community just happens to be the Asian American community. And I don't know. In terms of stuff here in Daly City, a lot of it is just sort of identifying what the needs are. And I think Daly City, while being heavily populated with Filipinos, actually doesn't have a whole lot of Filipino-specific services, especially youth services. Youth services in general, but then in terms of the Filipino community, they're definitely kind of limited. And so when we started up the Luana Cultural Center, we were definitely addressing a need, both in terms of Filipino relevant education and culture and arts programming. Yeah. Yeah. You're editing, right?
Kinda. How do you define the term political justice?
Political justice? Social justice?
Social justice, yeah.
Social justice. Social justice is this idea that I'm gonna get all teachers. Social being society, justice being fair, righteous, and equitable. But just this idea that we want to build our communities or society in the big picture, but our communities sort of on the smaller level, and build it upon a foundation of fair treatment of people and equality, and this idea that yeah, and ideally society should be just. And that could be defined in terms of, growing up, being raised Catholic, it's like you learn about social justice. I actually went to Catholic school and we had a class called social justice. And it's about having to do with everything from morality to politics to your day-to-day interactions with people, and sort of what is the way that you, how can you treat people in a way that's productive and fair and those kind of things. I don't know. Is there anything specific?
No, that's good.
Okay.
Do you feel that the Asian American community is misrepresented in today's society?
In sort of mainstream stuff?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think a couple years back it was a real issue of sort of underrepresentation or non-representation. Where, you just don't really see Asian Americans, or you didn't, especially when I was younger. You didn't see a whole lot of Asian Americans in the media, in the history books, and so on. I think things have definitely changed a little bit, at least in terms of representing a certain portion of the Asian American community. But in terms of misrepresentation, I think unfortunately the mainstream is only sort of interested in those images of any community of Asian Americans, of African Americans, of Latino Americans, that are palatable or marketable. So I think with Asian Americans, there actually really isn't a whole lot of stuff that you see as in. I think right now the biggest thing is like America's Best Dance Crews, right? And so it's kind of interesting to sort of see a lot of Asians and Filipinos specifically being seen and being propped up as like, hey, they can dance good. And that's kind of a surprise actually, because the sort of mainstream image of who dances good isn't necessarily Asian American. But in terms of things like politics, we're kind of in this interesting thing right now with the elections and everything, and you don't really hear too much about Asians in general, but you're starting to hear about who Asians are supporting in the election, and I don't know, I'm totally rambling. What was the question? You're editing, right? You have to edit.
I don't know how to edit on this thing, but
I'll help you.
The original question was, do you feel that Asian Americans are misrepresented?
Oh. Yes.
In why?
Oh. I think we're getting more images of Asian Americans in mainstream media, and however, I think they're not necessarily complete images. You see a lot of people who are wealthy. You see a lot of sort of college-educated Asian Americans in film and television. And when I say a lot, they're very limited. But the ones you do see are mostly that. You don't see a whole lot of sort of like, what does it mean to be a newcomer? What does it mean to be someone who just arrived at this country, and what are the issues that they deal with? What does it mean to live, 10 people, 12 people to like a 2-bedroom apartment? Those kinds of things you don't really hear too much about, and you don't see too many stories about that. But there have been attempts at sort of doing some things. I had a conversation recently about that movie, The Debut, and I show that a lot to my students, and of course it only shows a tiny slice of Filipino American life, but it was a good step forward in terms of trying to represent some of the identity issues and some sort of the struggles that some Filipino Americans deal with. The big thing for me as an educator is that the lack of representation of Asian American voices and Asian voices in general, in the social studies curriculum.